Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
What's the prompt today? Good morning again. So we'll go, some more people joined us, so welcome to those who joined. So we go around and say our names, and then we'll introduce Trip, and then hear from Trip. And some of you know when I facilitate, I like to encourage people to share their personal pronouns, preferred personal pronouns. You never know who's in the space, who new people, and so we don't want to just assume how people like to be addressed or referred to in the third person when we gossip about them. So my name's David.
Bob.
Grisha, he, him.
Andre.
Christian, him.
Charles.
Greg. Jason, he, him.
Michael, he, him.
My name is Mark, he, him.
Bob.
Jeff, he, him.
Tom.
My name is Jerry.
I'm Clint.
I'm Tom.
Matthew, he, him.
I'm Larry. My name is Ray.
Kevin.
I'm David, he, him.
My name is Stephen. My name is Paul.
Susan, she,
Joe. Tim, he, him.
Richard, he, him.
Jay.
I'm Brad.
I'm Samuel.
And again, anyone else here for the first time? Okay, I just want to acknowledge Tom and just welcome Tom back, because he's been away from a long absence. It's really great to see you again. Good. Cool. And welcome, Trip. Thanks for joining. He's our speaker today. Can I talk about you?
Sure.
So Trip is a graduate of Spirit Rock's community leader and dedicated practitioner program. He's very involved in the San Francisco Insight here in town as both a board member, a teacher, and leads sitting groups, and also works as a psychotherapist with a private practice here in San Francisco. And if there's anything else you want to add, of course you can. So welcome. Thanks for being here this morning. Oh, and also he's the facilitator and teacher for the upcoming retreat. We'll hear more about that at the end. So thanks.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here with you. And I'm also excited about joining those of you who will be on the retreat. We're really looking forward to that. And I actually designed my talk today to be something that could be standing alone as a talk, but also a little bit of a springboard into the retreat too for people who will be coming, and also something that people who join the retreat and aren't here today will be fine having missed. So trying to find the sweet spot in all those areas. And the subject that I have in mind to talk about today is starting with one of those Buddhist terms that might or might not be familiar to you. So the term is yoniso manasikara, which means essentially wise attention. I'm curious, is that something people have heard about, or just kind of a show of hands? Is that something that's kind of familiar to you, or not so familiar? Familiar? Okay, good. Thanks, that helps me to know. So it's one of those terms that I think of it as talking about something that is really basic. So it doesn't fall on the Noble Eightfold Path, for example. It's not one of those eight that we might hear about more frequently. Wise understanding, wise intention, wise action, speech, and livelihood, wise effort, mindfulness, and concentration. this is something that's kind of more basic in a way. Yonisa Manasikara, this notion of wise wise attention. So it comes from a couple of different roots. The word yoniso literally means to the womb, to the womb, the womb. So the meaning is that it's getting at the core or the essence of a matter, the center, the pith or the substance. Manasikara simply means to keep something in mind. Manasi means in the mind, and kara means made or done. So it's about keeping in mind the womb, or keeping in mind the sort of heart, or the kind of deepest, most basic aspects. I think of it as, in some ways, keeping in mind the heart of the teachings being suffering and not suffering, or suffering and the end of suffering. So I'll say more about that. So wise attention, one way to describe it would be to call it selecting wisely the things to bear in mind. We're trying to choose what it is that we're going to focus our attention on, directing the mind to the root of things. In the Buddhist text, Yoniso Manasikara is listed among the 4 virtues conducive to growth. There's one of the lists that it appears on, the 4 virtues conducive to growth. Or the same list is also called the 4 factors for attaining stream entry, the first step on the path to enlightenment, to awakening. So these 4, it's a list I really love. The 4 virtues conducive to growth are: 1, association with a wise friend. 2, listening to good teaching. 3, wise reflection or attention, Yoniso Manasikara. And 4, practicing in accordance with good teaching. So it's super basic, really, when you think about it. And what I love about this list is how accessible it is, and also how it's sort of a different way of saying accessible, but how these are things that we're doing all the time without really even realizing it, or maybe without really appreciating or valuing. Start with the first, association with a wise friend. That's this group. That's Sangha. That's making a point of being around people who are going to help us go in the right direction. Listening to good teaching. Or let's say today, I don't want to, I started to say something self-deprecating, and I thought, well, that's not a good idea either. So, yeah, let's assume this is listening to good teaching. And coming here anytime you come, it's listening to good teaching. And reading is listening to good teaching. Listening to a Dharma talk is listening to good teaching. It's basically soaking up the Dharma, being in an environment where it's possible to soak up the Dharma. Wise reflection. And again, I'll sort of start with this kind of simple definition of wise reflection as being reflecting on whether we're heading toward more suffering or heading toward freedom. Keeping that in mind. Keeping suffering or the end of suffering in mind and pointing in that direction. And then 4, practicing in accordance with good teaching. So living the Dharma, carrying it through us. As I said, I love this list because I feel like they're all accessible, and I actually do feel like the wise reflection piece is the one that, for me, has required the most reflection, has required the most kind of time to really think about, well, what does this really mean, and what does it really mean in my own life? But just to say again that I feel like it's this beautiful basic list, and I also think we're so lucky that we have it I'll speak for myself anyway, I feel so lucky living here in this time, in this place, realizing just how much access I actually have to wise friends, to being able to hear the Dharma. I mean, these are things that, growing up, I didn't even think about in this way and really wouldn't have been possible. So here we find ourselves in this really kind of auspicious environment, difficult and challenging in many ways, but also for this list, I think really auspicious. So when I think of wise attention, I do think of it as being this kind of deep, sort of basic quality that's being pointed at. As I said, it's not on the path as a path factor, but it really, to me, is a bridge in some way between the wisdom part of the path and the practice part of the path. It's in both directions in a way. It's the kind of practice that leads to the arising of wisdom, paying attention to whether they're suffering or not suffering. And it's also a kind of attention that is informed by wisdom, an attention that we can bring to practice that's informed by wisdom, informed by an understanding of suffering and its end. So we start with the premise that there are some things that are worth paying attention to, and then some things that aren't worth paying attention to. And whether they're suffering or not suffering is one of those things that's really worth paying attention to. When I think about it for myself, I think that it's about taking my suffering seriously. And I don't mean seriously in the sense of sternly, but seriously in the sense of it matters. A sutta. This was said by the Blessed One, said by the Arahants, so I have heard. With regard to internal factors, I don't envision any other single factor like appropriate attention as doing so much for a monk in training who has not attained the heart's goal, but remains intent on the unsurpassed safety from bondage. A monk who attends appropriately abandons what is unskillful, and develops what is skillful. So the Buddha is naming this quality of appropriate attention or wise attention as more than any other internal factor, the most important. So an internal factor meaning something that we notice is present or absent within ourselves. Nothing's more important than this, the Buddha is saying, than paying attention to the presence or absence of wise attention, knowing. Venerable Analayo speaks of yoniso manasikara as a way to conceptualize practice in daily life. And he especially draws attention to the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of awakening as ways to characterize whether the mind is suffering or not. So let's think about that for a moment. One way that we can particularly pay attention to what's happening is to know whether we're being impacted by the hindrances of greed, ill will, of restlessness or anxiety, sloth or torpor, sleepiness and doubt. So we can know whether those are present. And then on the other side, we can know whether we're experiencing some of the 7 factors of awakening, of mindfulness, of investigation of dharmas, of what's happening, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity, or balance in the mind. So part of yoniso manasikara is bearing in mind the state of the mind and caring about the state of the mind, paying attention. it's been very influential for me, and I'll talk a little bit about my own relationship to this idea. Very influential as I've noticed how much I actually ignore my own suffering. Like really kind of don't care about it or just plow through it. The suffering that's on this basic level. I think when I look at my own experience, the mistake that I make is either that I think that my suffering is inevitable, so I kind of don't bother dealing with it, or I actually believe it's productive. Mm-hmm. I actually believe that what my mind is doing, which is suffering, is productive. So, for example, when I experience some kind of difficulty in the world, I have a tendency to like really bear down on it. It's like, I just like want to figure it out. I want to solve it. I want to think about all the different angles. I want to imagine all the different things that might come up so I'm prepared for them. I want to, I think what I want to do is ultimately push the problem away somehow. But I don't think of it in those terms in the moment. I actually think I want to solve the problem. It's like I want to fix it. Or even I want to be the one who solves the problem and the one who fixes the problem. So what's actually happening in my mind as I pay more attention from this perspective, pay attention, in the sense of yoniso manasikara, is that I'm experiencing a ton of aversion to start with. I don't want this thing to be happening at all. I'm grasping at, like being the one who fixes it, being the one who's on the other side of it. I'm feeling a ton of anxiety, a lot of worry and restlessness in the mind. Oh, can I do this? Can I do that? Like, well, what if they say this, or what if they say that, or how should I respond to this email, and all that kind of stuff. There's actually a lot of fatigue in the mind, a lot of drowsiness, and kind of, in some ways, sleepiness, sloth, and torpor. I mean, I actually find myself having to take naps, when I get worked up like this. And then there's a ton of doubt. And doubt I'll speak to in a little bit more detail, maybe in a few minutes. But there's just a lot of really questioning about, like, the best strategy. What should I be doing? A most recent example, just that was coming up over the past few days, I was with some family, and at different times the situation was a little stressful. We were driving together. We were going from point A to point B, kind of trying to figure out how to get there and all that kind of stuff. And so I knew I was going to be talking about this, and I thought, oh, well, here's a little laboratory for me. I'm sitting in the back seat. There's literally nothing else to do. The radio isn't on. There's nothing to do, but I'm going to really just pay attention to this. And so I saw the mind getting caught up in liking and not liking, for the most part, what was going on. Having just an attitude, let's say, not necessarily in the neutral sense. And I really forgot about what we're talking about here. I was caught in what is called ayoniso manasikara, which means not bearing in mind or not paying appropriate attention to what's going on, not really noticing my own suffering, what was happening. And then I reflected on the experience. I started to feel the anxiety that was in my body and the agitation that was in my mind. I could see the aversion and the grasping that were coming up so strongly for me. And I started to think, how can I practice with this? What can I do differently? And I just returned to the breath. I just started breathing. Came back into the connection with the body in the moment and the truth of the situation as it was. just the true details of it, the boredom, the kind of wondering what was going to come next, the excitement, all these different aspects in the mind that as I reconnected to the body and just oriented to where I actually was, kind of started just to clarify for me. And as I returned to the breath and accepted, the fatigue I was feeling, as I relaxed into it, I started to notice that there was some pleasure in the body. So here we are coming back to those awakening factors. It's like there's mindfulness that then gives rise to a kind of investigative quality, like, well, what's actually here? And then some energy comes up from that, like interest and energy, like the ability to move into it. And then from that, there really was some joy. There's something about connecting to reality that's really joyful, isn't there? It just feels good in a really kind of simple way in the body, especially when you can do it with some awareness, so you can really see how it makes a difference. You can really see how, 10 seconds ago, I was feeling like I can't take this anymore. And now suddenly, not only can I take it, but I'm actually aware of a kind of joy in the body. It actually feels okay. And then from that, there's that sense of tranquility and concentration, like the mind becomes more centered, and balance, equanimity. Balance being the subject of the retreat. Balance. Things are okay. So that's just a little example of how practicing with Yoniso Manasikara manifests. Ajahn Pasano calls it attention grounded in Dharma. He says, if we want to have a still mind, we have to attend to the stillness that arises, for example, with the breath. We don't need to have a story in order to breathe. It also means not following along in all the unhelpful places the mind might go. And then we can ask ourselves some deeper questions, like, what do I really have in mind for my mind? What am I really organizing myself around? And what do I want to be organizing myself around? Am I organized around gain rather than loss, so I can feel happier more of the time rather than unhappy more of the time in that sense? That will point to, one strategy, one way to do things. But if I'm oriented instead, or what I want for my mind is a deeper sense of ease, so that I can meet the challenges of the world more effectively and contribute more, that might lead to a different kind of a strategy. We can really ask ourselves, what do we have in mind for this mind? So I was going to talk about doubt, and this is true. I mean, when I really look at what I have in mind for my mind, I notice that there's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of... Frequently, I still believe that my mind is going to be... that I'm going to be happiest and sort of safest when I can control things. And that really is the strategy that I am involved in a lot of the time. A fair amount of the time. Too much of the time, let's even say. And there really is doubt about this other strategy, this strategy of really trusting a deep connection to this moment as it is. And I think one of the reasons I love this notion of Yoniso Manasikara so much is that it's so basic about what are you going to focus on? What are you really going to pay attention to? I think I've mainly heard monastics talking about it in great detail, and it makes sense to me because I think of them as the ones who are really showing the way how to overcome this kind of deep, basic doubt. Like they really are throwing themselves in every day, moment by moment by moment, into this strategy of finding the deepest possible happiness through what's actually here in this moment. And it's radical. It's really radical to do that. And our conditioning is so much around not doing that, around these other ways that we try to organize our existence, make it work for us. When I see that, when I see that operating in myself, that doubt, that kind of spinning, that when I, as I said before, when I take my own suffering seriously, like, oh, I'm suffering right now, and this matters, this is something to be aware of, to do something about. When I come into that point of view, when there is Yoni-Samana-Sakara, I find that I can usually pretty easily come back to the body, into this moment, and to the recognition and really the appreciation that this is all I have. I don't know what's coming next, much as I might want to. And I never have. I've never known what's really coming next. I laugh because I think it's kind of funny in a certain way. How much effort I've expended to try to know what was coming next, and it's never actually worked. It's never been true. I've never known what's coming next. It's crazy. What's here right now? That's the question. That's something worth asking and something worth pointing the mind to. And the mind can spin off and we notice and we bring it back. And informed by our intention and holding on to our experience, what's really here, we can see that, I see for myself anyway, that this feels better and easier. It builds confidence. It's something that, see that it's something that can be done, something that's valuable. And I just keep connecting and getting in at the root, at the womb. And the knot tends to unravel. The knot in the mind just tends to unravel. I'm sure you've all seen that. A kind of more grand way to say it in a way is it's a change of lineage from I am this crazy mind to I am the one who listens to this crazy mind. I'm with it. I'm observing it. Breaks down that identification. So we can see how whatever's happening in our lives can get spun into a narrative, a story, a task, an identification, all these different kinds of mental qualities. And then we can also see that it's possible to just return, just come back to what's here. Paying attention, just noticing. Is there suffering in this moment? Is there freedom in this moment? And if there's suffering, caring. Just caring. Ultimately, we're asking ourselves, can we let go of what's not worth holding on to? So I'm going to end with a poem and then just open it up for discussion. See if people have thoughts or ideas or anything you'd like to share. This is from a book that's about to come out. It's called The First Free Women, Poems of the Early Buddhist Nuns by Maddie Weingast. This is a new translation of the Theravadan, which is the old, ancient series of poems, or in many cases awakening poems, that the first nuns wrote. So going back to the time of the Buddha, the women who were awakening with the Buddha. And this is from Sister Mitakali, or the Friend of the Dark. She writes, I was always smart. If the path was good, I figured it would make me even smarter. One night, while meditating, I watched my thoughts piling themselves up all around me. My mind built a hut out of all those thoughts, then filled that hut. Soon, it was a whole city, a whole world. Oh, my beautiful, beautiful thoughts. Who will look after you after I'm gone? I swear I could weep. I could weep for all of you. My sisters, do you really want to be free? Are you ready to leave behind all your precious little houses so that you can make your home everywhere? It's not as hard as you might think. So, this is our challenge and our opportunity to let go of these houses in order to have a home. And that's what this teaching is pointing to. So thank you for your attention. Please.
Could you say a little about how the wise attention is or isn't related to the vagueness, the feeling tones?
Okay, yeah, let me think about that for a second and respond. So the question is, how is wise attention related to Vedana, or feeling tone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's related to get what?
To Vedana, or feeling tone?
Could you describe feeling tone? I've heard the term, but...
Sure. Yeah, so taking a step back. So Vedana, or feeling tone, it's actually one of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So if you're familiar with the Satipatthana Sutta, this is where the Buddha lays out the practice of essentially insight meditation, which is mindfulness of the body, or form, mindfulness of Vedana, or feeling tone, and I'll describe that in a second, mindfulness of the sort of mental states, and mental isn't quite right, it's citta, which is the heart-mind, so awareness of the states in the mind and heart. And then the 4th foundation is mindfulness of dharmas, of the sort of basic truths, including the 4 foundations of mindfulness, including the hindrances and the awakening factors and things like that. So these are the 4 kinds of objects of meditation in the sort of basic Satipatthana framework. So feeling tone is something that we can bear in mind as we're meditating. And it's said that there are 3 basic feeling tones. So it's not emotion, it's actually more kind of valence, or the spin of the feeling. There's pleasant, unpleasant, and then the 3rd is sometimes called neutral. More technically, I think it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And this is a really important and helpful thing to bear in mind, because as we notice, it's said that the feeling tone arises automatically in each moment. And by moment, we mean like micro-moment. Anytime there is contact with a sense door, so you see something, you hear something, you think something, there's automatically this kind of feeling tone that just arises. It just registers as pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It tends that when it's the neutral, that we don't even really, we're not really aware of it. We just sort of don't know it. So just as you're sitting here right now with your eyes open, you might notice that they're seeing. And then you just might notice that there's a subtle sort of tone that goes with that. Like I'm looking at the brick and I find it to be a little pleasant. There's just something kind of nice about the way the light is hitting it. every moment is going to have something like that going on. It might be unpleasant. I just noticed a little feeling in my knee that was just slightly unpleasant. Nothing terribly painful, but as I connect to that experience in the knee, there's just a bit of unpleasantness. So, what's so important about Vedana is that this is the gateway to clinging. This is the gateway to suffering, because what typically happens is that if the feeling tone is pleasant, we want more of it. We just move to wanting more. And if it's unpleasant, we move to aversion. Just very quickly and naturally in the mind. And if it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant, we usually just sort of space out on it. We don't really notice it. So, in one of these three ways, often we're disconnecting. We're going out to wanting, we're going out to aversion, or we're spacing out. So, as a focus for practice or awareness, it's a key moment, a key spot to be aware of so that we can kind of catch that and come back instead of moving out. So, to answer the question, or to try to answer the question, so Yoniso Manasikara is in some way a little bit more basic. It's more like, let's pay attention to what's going on, which will then include Vedana, so that we can not suffer. So I would say that for me anyway, the awareness of Vedana or mindfulness practice in general is something that I undertake when I am first wisely attending to whether I'm suffering or not in a given moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's sort of foundational.
It's foundational is the way I think about it. Yeah. Kind of like those foundational factors, that list, of like it's foundational to just be around wise people and to listen to the Dharma and to practice. It's foundational in that sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for asking. I think your hand was up first.
Yeah, I'm really inviting you to talk. That's great. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to make the retreat. One of the things that you touched on that I've been especially noticing recently is I often try to, in overriding my suffering, and what I've noticed is when I actually stayed with it, kind of with the contraction, what's involved, that when I'm with that truth, that then that breaks open to this underlying bliss. And all of a sudden I'm feeling joy. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? Like the way you say amazing, it has that quality of like miraculous.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen? Magical. Yeah, exactly. Well, and there you are, because you're just exactly in the heart of it, moving from aversion, from a hindrance, coming to mindfulness, and then there are the awakening factors just like unfolding right in front of you. And the beauty of these lists is not that they're something for us to memorize. It's that they're a way to describe what we already know, what's already so familiar. And then there's a certain kind of reinforcement I think that comes from that too, from knowing, oh, there it is on the 7 factors. This is joy. But the real reward is just in the experience, isn't it? It's just, it's beautiful.
It's overall, a word that is particularly important for me is to remembers the immediacy of being with it all. You're breaking it down to the different components, but it's like that right here in the moment of experience.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Yeah, just that presence right here. Thanks. Yes.
Trip, thank you so much. I'm really glad you're going to be teaching the retreat.
Thank you.
Because you're clearly a good vessel for the Dharma. So, and I like the fact that you smile while you're talking about it. There's a joyfulness. So 2 questions. Do you pronounce your last name like Wheel of the Dharma or like while we're meditating?
Wheel of the Dharma.
Wheel of the Dharma.
Yes.
Thank you. I love this putting attention on our suffering. The thought of it, not wallowing in it, but sort of honoring it. It's the first noble truth, right?
Yeah.
There is suffering, and I think I tend to, like waltz over that. Just step over, like, oh yeah, there's suffering. Yeah, I got it. That's a sort of a philosophical, mental, like, oh yes. But how, can you connect perhaps the importance of acknowledging and knowing our suffering to compassion? Our ability to actually be compassionate. And does it require, how do those interdovetail?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question and a great thing to talk about. I think they're inextricably tied, really, because it's said that compassion is the heart's natural response to suffering. So when the heart is connected to difficulty, compassion naturally arises. Whether it's our own difficulty or someone else's difficulty, when we really are connected to it, the heart will respond with compassion. Which is really just caring.
It's different than aversion. It's suffering. Ooh.
Right. Yeah.
It's moving towards it.
Well, the moving the moving towards it is connecting to it, and then the compassion is this natural response, unbidden, really, that just arises. It's like, if we're really connected to suffering, we will care about it, and the heart just feels that. It's one of those things that actually, in some ways, makes it easier for me to tolerate some of the difficulty that I experience around, in the political system or wherever. It's like to realize that lots of suffering there, that's not being connected to. That's really the problem, is that there's not a genuine connection to the suffering. If there were, there would be compassion. I mean, we can all sort of, in some ways, hold that there are people whose political views I disagree with strongly, who would probably argue that they're connecting to a certain kind of suffering and feeling compassion, like that their response is sort of their sure heart's response to the suffering. And I guess we all have to decide for ourselves if we're going to make room for that possibility. But I think there's room for improvement. And I think, I can say for myself there's room for improvement. But so the way I would say it is that the compassion is the response to the genuine connection to suffering, which is a nice thing to understand, because then we really don't have to fear it. We really can feel very open to it. We want to connect to what's difficult in order to be able to respond to it. It's necessary. I remember for myself, a time I was doing, it was one of those programs, I think it was the Dedicated Practitioners program. So the reason I mention that is because there's an opportunity to talk, during the course of the program, during the retreats. So it's not just silent. And I was with some friends. There were 3 of us, and there was some dynamic going on. And the 3 of us were all friends. There was some dynamic that was going on between the other 2, and it brought up this kind of envy for me. I felt sort of excluded somehow, and I noticed that. So it's in the quiet of the retreat, but it's also in the practice of the interactive connection with people. And this will not sound as profound as it felt, but there was this moment where I was just like, oh, this is terrible, I'm being left out. I was going on and on and on with the story, and then it just dawned on me, like, this is suffering. This is it. Like, this is what he was talking about. And it was this revelation, just a real revelation, that this First Noble Truth is actually this moment that is so intimately familiar to me, that I just go through over and over and over and over and over again. I've never forgotten that. It was like my eyes just opened up. Like, this is it. I always thought suffering was, like war or things that I didn't really experience and was somehow sheltered from, and that I could hope to be sheltered from, like that I could keep barriers around. So I hope that speaks to what you were asking.
It strikes me that what you're talking about is sort of like harm reduction.
Harm reduction, say a little bit more.
Well, harm reduction is a philosophy in substance use where people are facing huge issues of addiction. And harm reduction is the philosophy that look at that suffering and choose the path that's more healthy without saying exactly what that would be.
Yeah.
And it's more getting into your body, looking at the suffering, which is the addiction, retreating back into your, what really do you want to do as a healthy alternative, without saying what that should be. That's harm reduction.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
It is, and it's a huge movement right now in the addiction community.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
As an alternative to abstinence or another way to understand how to respond. So,
and I have found that to be very, very applicable in just daily living. My experience in harm reduction, and it's really what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
Seems to me.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for making that connection. And that makes a lot of sense to me too. It really is just about connecting to the present moment and caring about what comes next and having a framework to work from.
And not having it pre-decided for you in advance, that you decide in the moment, how do you really see this suffering, which is, and then deciding, wow, I can do this instead of that, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. I could just feel the engagement and the aliveness as you're saying it in that connection. I really appreciate your bringing that out. Thank you.
I've actually been in harm reduction program for a few years, and I've used it in relating to my family. And I have a very strong Mormon family and huge problems with my mother. And I found that using that technique in relating to the family, where I would put out what I really wanted and getting a complete cement wall and no response whatsoever, and retreating into my feeling okay about what I'm doing, eventually I feel like all that's just disappearing away, and it's amazing how these barriers can be dissolved just by sort of retreating and advancing and that whole process. It's amazing, actually. And you don't even know where it's going to go, but it's fun, actually. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Your turn. Please.
Just real quick, the example you gave, I appreciate it if you follow it through. Like, let's say the situation was that you were being excluded, it wasn't your imagination, and you're feeling emotional pain about that. And so you identify correctly, wow, this is suffering. Well, then what happens after that?
Yeah, well, let me say, honestly, most of the time, I don't know if it's true or not true.
Well, let's say in this instance it is.
But what I'm saying to agree with you is like, I don't know that it wasn't. Maybe it was. Yeah, it might well have been. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, sure, let's assume it was.
And
okay.
Did the emotional pain diminish when you identified it as suffering, or did you just say, okay, it's there, that's just the way it is, it's just like it's an interesting social situation, which I've been in, I'm sure everybody else has been in too, and there are other situations that are different but are at the same level of, it's not like you have a terminal disease or anything, but there's stuff going on in a social context.
Yeah.
And I just want to, after you identify it, can you go into what happens after that?
Yeah, sure. I'll try. And I'll say that for myself, honestly, my response about how I don't know either way is actually where I go a lot of the time when that kind of thing happens. Because I realize that I actually feel a lot of confusion about that. And something can happen. I can feel like I'm accepted, and then some little thing happens, and I feel like I'm not accepted, and then some little thing happens, and same people, 3 sentences later, it's like not much has happened. It's really all happening in my mind, and I see that. And there doesn't often seem to be a reality that I can simply rest in, a truth about I'm accepted or I'm not accepted, or I feel safe or don't feel safe. And so what I do is to just really stay with and even open to that confusion. Like, I can't tell. I cannot tell. I know that there's certain ways that I'm fine. Like I can tell that, in a moment like that, I can tell that physically I'm okay. Like I don't think I'm going to get physically attacked. But where the paranoid mind goes, my paranoid mind about whether I'm being rejected or accepted, it's just kind of a mess, honestly. And there's not really refuge to be found in the mind that's trying to figure things out. And so I move away from the mind that's trying to figure things out and just be with the one who sees this mind with really a lot of that's when the compassion really comes up for me. It's like, oh, this mind, you're trying to figure things out, you're trying to make me safe, you're trying to tell me what's going on here, but you honestly don't know.
Yeah, real quickly, my experience has been in a situation like that, what causes the pain isn't what's happening right now, but similar situations, whatever long train they are that go back as even to childhood, where you felt excluded, you felt you weren't being accepted by the group, you felt whatever, similar like that. And, it does put it in context, saying I'm feeling all this pain right now, but it's not because of what's going on right now. It's because and I'm drawing all the strength of the pain from past experiences that are just being, re-blooming in my mind again, or re-emerging.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that sounds really like a helpful way to do it, to just realize that this experience of whatever's happening in the moment, whether you want to call it confusion or whatever it is, has this kind of karmic momentum from past experiences that's led you to where you are. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Answered your own question. Thank you.
Sure.
I like it when that happens.
Sure.
Yes.
I just wanted to say around the suffering is the reactivity, the notion of, because I know when I've experienced suffering, I really notice I just can see my own reactivity to it. But I think the thing that where I trip myself up is where I don't give the enough pause, enough breath, just to sit with it before I react. And then I kept suffering on the reaction that I just gave to the suffering, the initial suffering. So just back to the notion of being mindful of the reactivity.
Yeah.
And giving that space before reaction.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Makes me think of that Viktor Frankl quote, between the stimulus and the response, there's a space, and in that space lies the possibility of freedom. That's not a quote, but that's a paraphrasing. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Chip. Yeah. We're kind of at time right now. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Yes. I want to do things a little different. Can we circle first before your announcements? So we can stand up and circle first. Sure. Before I introduce or pass the mic to our host, are there any announcements that people have? Retreat?
I have two announcements. Well, I'm the host. But first, the GBF retreat is happening on the 11th and the 13th of October. As you heard, Tripp is our Dharma teacher, and you see how fabulous he is. So we have a few spaces left, so it's not too late to sign up. I don't think. Where's Jerry? Do we have a cutoff, or
We're fine.
we're good? So
Well, this trip was so great today that we get 20 people. Which would be wonderful.
So I'm also the host today. There are some cookies and dates to enjoy. You're welcome to have tea. Just stick your cup in the dishwasher. There's a sign-up sheet on the credenza if you want to get our newsletter electronically. And some people go out to lunch around 12:30, meet by the door.
Any other announcements?
I have a quick announcement.
Please.
I started with another friend of mine doing a contemplative dance practice that was developed by Barbara Dilly at Naropa. And we're doing it at the Joe Good Annex. I felt like it was appropriate to offer it for both reasons. And it's, don't let the title of dance throw you off. It's very open to bodies, and it has contemplative practice at the beginning and throughout. So if you'd like to join, come talk to me.
Talk to you. Okay.
I have an announcement. Just a reminder, Hal Hershey's memorial is November 17th at the SF Columbarium from 3 to 5.
So the monthly book group is meeting the first Sunday of the month. I think that's October 5th. And we're listening to the New York Times Magazine's 1619 project. If you're not familiar with that, it was in August, September, just a whole multimedia project that's online about the 1619 is the year that the first ship of 20 to 30 enslaved Africans arrived in the colonies. I mean, long before that, they were being stolen and kidnapped and taken to South America. And it's like that's the advent of the beginning of American democracy. So it's a lot of stories, essays, podcasts. We're meeting on the Sunday the 5th, 6th, thank you. So if you're interested, you could talk to me about that, the discussion we're going to have. Any other announcements?
Dharma?
You have an
Not
announcement?
Dharma, no. Donna?
Oh, Donna, yes. Donna is the polyword for generosity, and the Sangha here, our practice is sustained through the generosity of all of us to give every Sunday. So I'm guessing, Richard, are you going around with the
I will
bowls?
have the bowl in hand.
So please contribute what you can. The suggested recommended is between $10 and $20. If you, within your means, can do more, that's beautiful. If you're unable to do less, that's beautiful also. But it supports our rent here for this beautiful facility, as well as the quarterly newsletter that goes out to incarcerated people, as well as a monthly dinner that's prepared for the youth at Larkin Street. So it's in-house, but also service as well that supports. So please give us. Anything else?
Our speaker.
Speaker next week.
Oh, the Donna supports the speaker also. I don't know the speaker for next week. I don't have the schedule of somebody.
I don't know.
But you can look at newsletter.
Or Facebook.
Okay.
The website.
Tripp, I'm sorry, do you have a practice of dedicating the merit that you have? Could you do that for us?
Sure.
Today? Oh, thank you. Okay, great.
Just feeling into the goodness that comes from our being together, from our own practice, individually and collectively. And then if it feels appropriate, offering any merit, any benefit that arises from our practice freely to all beings in all directions. Sharing these wishes, may all beings be safe. May all beings be truly happy. May all beings live in peace. And may all beings know the deepest possible ease.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.